PMP exam. I know lots of you are getting ready to take the exam, but you're in a bottleneck. You're finding it hard to retain the information about processes. People is not a problem for you. Business is not really a problem either. But the main problem is process. And today, I'm going to help you master the process domain. Let's start off with how the PMI sees project management from a predictive perspective. From a predictive perspective, we see 5 process groups of initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. The mnemonic is simply, I prefer eating mangoes chilled, or I prefer extra money cash. I prefer eating mangoes chilled, or I prefer extra money cash. Initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. Now let me paint a picture for you. Assume you are a project manager for a business to move people in. Let's say the business is accommodation for small businesses. You're the project manager. Your job is to move people in. Well, every move is a project. So initiating would be understanding at a high level what the project entails. It entails moving people in. And to initiate it, there could be a charter that states you are the project manager and states the project at a high level. Then we get into planning. Planning is where you get into the details, deciding the timeline, how much would it cost, what is the level of quality we're looking for in this move, are we installing fixtures, what is the scope, what exactly are we doing? You would plan everything, schedule, scope, cost, quality, resources, communication. You also take a look at risk because you don't want anyone to get hurt. Procurement, maybe you need to get some contractors in to lay new tile if the small business wants something changed. And then stakeholder management. So all of that needs to be planned. After you're done with your plan, you execute. That's carrying out the plan. You begin to ensure that the movers are moving stuff in properly. Whoever is working on what is doing it well. You're monitoring and controlling the project to make sure things are going according to plan. And at the end, hopefully you will get to closing out the project. And that's it. So at a very high level, initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. Now, if you paid close attention to the planning process group, this is where a lot of the knowledge areas begin to emerge. And the knowledge areas are just areas that a project manager should know. They're areas that a project manager should be aware of, plan for, manage, monitor. Let's go through the knowledge areas with this rather colorful mnemonic. I saw 6 chipmunks quietly roasting coffee, reading poetry stories. I saw 6 chipmunks quietly roasting coffee, reading poetry stories. So, I is for integration, S is for scope, S is for schedule, C is for cost, Q is for quality, R is for resources, the next C is for communications, the next I is for risk, P for procurement, and S for stakeholder. It's a rather funny mnemonic, but it's very helpful. And I've taught this to scores of people worldwide, and they find this as a nice little lever to remember the knowledge areas. Should we go again? I saw 6 chipmunks quietly roasting coffee, reading poetry stories. It's that simple. So if you think about each of these knowledge areas, they actually mean something in your grand scheme in the plan. So I for integration. Integration is always present because it's always moving stuff in a cohesive way. It's taking all the moving parts of the project, but bundling them together, making sure they're talking to each other and moving in a cohesive way. That's why we call it integration. Integration is like a mom or a dad that has so many kids, and you got to take one to soccer practice, you got to take one to football, you got to take one to music lessons. It's like combining so many things. That's how integration is. I see integration as the glue that binds. That's integration. Then you have scope, like a telescope, scoping out what needs to be done. Have you ever looked through a telescope? What happens? Everything becomes clearer. So scope is clarifying what this project is about, what needs to be done at a granular level. This is where you're going into details. Remember, this isn't initiating where things are done at a high level. This is planning where you're going into the details. So after scope, you think about the timeline, which is schedule management. And in schedule management, we're thinking about how long will each activity take. And by the time you string the activities together in a particular way, you have the total duration for the project. So it's keeping your eye on the timeline and ensuring that people are doing what they should at the right time and things aren't taking too long. That's schedule management. So think about a clock. So I'm going to give you imagery to think about these things, all right? So integration is a juggler. Scope is looking through a telescope. Schedule management is a clock. Cost management is a wallet. That's where the money is. So in cost management, we are estimating how much we will spend on each of the activities, and we're rolling that up into a final total amount. That's cost. Then we get into quality. And for the area of quality, I like thinking about a rosette, or that quality sign that has those ribbons coming from it. There's something that looks like there's a quality check being done. So that's how I like thinking about quality. Or you can think about a board with 3 ticks to say, yes, quality has been achieved. But quality is fitness for use, conformance to requirements, customer satisfaction, and Kaizen. And Kaizen just means continuous improvement. So when you think about quality, you need to plan for quality, and then you need to manage quality, make sure that quality is being done, and when you get your deliverable out, you ensure that that deliverable, that final output, is quality all the way. Then we get to resources. It's all about people. So for this, I just imagine a group of people sitting around a table, but you also have equipment. So I could think about a backhoe or a lorry. And then we think about supplies. I could think about a notebook. So I often say resources are about human, equipment, material, supplies. And maybe there's even facilities. Maybe you're working in a specific facility that has all these machines, and that's what the project is about. That's where it's going to be done. Well, that's resources. So we ensure that we plan for resources and we effectively manage them. Then we get into the next knowledge area, which is communications. This is what the project manager spends 70 to 90% of the time doing, communicating. So you want to make sure that you think about the 5 W's: the what, the when, the where, the who, the why, and the how, and the H. The 5 W's and the H of communication. That helps you to do a good job as a PM. You want to communicate on point. You don't want to communicate out of turn. You want to communicate stuff that is irrelevant, right? And you want to make sure you're communicating to the right stakeholders at the right time. Then we get into the R for risk. Risk is all about managing uncertainty. Uncertainties are things that could either derail you on the project, or they could actually work well for you on the project. We have positive uncertainties and negative uncertainties. So a risk is an uncertain event that, if it happens, could affect your project positively or negatively. And as a good project manager, you need to account for all of those. So in my example of moving people into the facility, you don't want anyone to get hurt. You don't want fingers to get jammed. You don't want people to fall over if someone's mopping a floor. Those are the kind of things that you scale up when you get into bigger projects with bigger money. The bigger the projects, the bigger the risk. The next one that we get into after risk is procurement. Procurement deals with you buying, purchasing whatever you need outside the firm. And you could purchase goods or services. Maybe you get someone who's good at tile to tile the floor. That's a procurement. Maybe you are equipping every office with new desks. That could be a procurement as well. Or maybe you just contract everything out to one person. They buy the desks, they install the desks, they make sure everything's good. It's all procurement. So in the world of procurement, it's all about writing out what needs to be done, a scope of work. We call it a procurement statement of work. Putting that into a request for proposal, which is a document that says, hey, we need this, can you do it? Or maybe it's a request for bid for some very simple items that are very easy to understand, maybe phones, maybe you need 50 phones. Well, you could just put out a request for bids because it's going to be apples to apples. It's all a specific type of phone with specific specs, and at the end of the day, whoever is supplying that is going to have to supply a particular brand of phone that meets those specs. So we use a request for bid when it's a level playing field. The final one after procurement is stakeholder management. And stakeholder management is all about people that matter. A stakeholder is someone who can impact your project or be impacted by your project. So as a good project manager, you want to make sure you are thinking about these people right from the get-go. You're identifying them, you're planning how to get them engaged, you are engaging them, and you're getting feedback from them. All this is broken out even further in my book called Project Management Essentials. And this book, you can find this book at a link below. You can get the PDF, you can get the hard copy. I'm going to put links there if you want this blown out, because I know some of you are not just in for the PMP. You want to take the PMP and you want to practice this stuff and you want to know it really well. You want to be all over it. If that sounds like you, this book is definitely a lifelong book, because this book isn't bound to the PMP exam. This book breaks down the 5 process groups, the 10 knowledge areas, and the 49 processes into enough granular detail to help you with your PMP exam, to better understand, or to help you in the real world. Okay? So if that's something you want, look for a link below and you'll be able to grab the book. Okay? I hope that made sense. If you got any questions from this first lesson, getting into the world of project management with intentionality, let me know. But remember, I prefer extra money cash, or I prefer eating mangoes chilled, and I saw 6 chipmunks quietly roasting coffee, reading poetry stories. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.